Hey fishing friends, welcome back to eFishin. I'm Rodney, and today we're back here in the bait lab, and I think we got something special for you today. If y'all remember back last year on Green River, we used a spinnerbait. Well, we used this spinnerbait right here to win a tournament down there. We had 18.5 pounds on it. So we're going to build this thing today, and hope y'all like this kind of stuff, because this one might be a little long, but we're going to go from taking a bar of lead, a coil of wire, and some spinnerbait hooks, and we're going to make this thing right here. Well, this is the one we used last year. You can see the paint's rubbed off of it where we were rubbing it through the rocks. That's why it's a slow roll spinnerbait. So I don't know if anybody's made one of these. Well, there's a lot of people out there making spinnerbait, but I don't know if anybody's made a slow roll spinnerbait. We're going to do it. We're going to show you how to do it. Well, a few things I do to it, and let's get to building. So the first thing you're going to need is you're going to need a mold. This is a Poisontail Jig Mold. It's a jig mold, you say, but you can make a spinnerbait out of this. All you got to do is make a little modification. And that modification, if y'all can see it right here, there's a little wire indent that goes into this thing that I've done with a little triangular file like this. And all I did was I just laid my wire right in here, closed this mold down with that wire on it, and kind of squeezed it together just to make a little indentation on it. And you don't want to do this too hard, because if you squeeze it too hard, you might break the handles off. You're not trying to indent the mold for your wire with this. All you want to do is just make a little etch mark on there, just to give you a place to know where to cut on both sides of the mold. But then I just took this little filed that little groove out. So all you do is you take your little triangular file and you just work it back and forth until you cut your groove out for your wire to sit. Don't take too long. You could use a Dremel tool or something like that, but with the file I found it's, you go pretty slow with it, so you can do a little bit, close your mold down, see how it fits and all that, and you can really fine tune it into where your wire fits in there just the way you want it. The next thing you're going to need is you're going to need a coil of wire. Now you can buy pre-made forms and all that, but I like getting the coils and kind of cutting them to the length I want. And if you buy the pre-made ones, you're kind of stuck with the way they're made. So and I'm using 0.040 wire, and you could use thicker or you could use lighter gauge wire. It's your spinnerbait, so do what you want to, but I found that this 0.04 wire does really good with these slow roll spinnerbaits, especially in the 3/4 ounce. So with this wire, I'm just going to take a ruler and I'm just going to measure this out. I like to use about 6.5 inches, 7 if you want a little longer arm on it. All I'm going to do is measure that out, and then just take a pair of wire cutters and snip that thing off where I've got a 6.5 inch piece of wire. So after you got your wire cut and your mold modified and your spinnerbait hook, you're ready to load this thing up. There's something you got to do first before you just stick that in there and stick your hook in. This thing will pull out on you in your spinnerbait. It may not do it immediately, but after you catch a few fish on it, it's very likely to come pulling out of there. So what you want to do, you want to take your little wire and your little handy dandy round nose pliers, and you're just going to take your wire kind of like that on the end of your pliers, and you're just going to bend this thing around to where you have a little hook like that. And then once you have that little hook like that, you'll take your little spinnerbait hook and hook it on there right like that. I like to just take a pair of regular pliers, and I like to bend that little U down to where that hook won't come off, and that way it's on there, it's not coming out. Spinnerbait hook's not going to fall out or get pulled out by a fish, and your wire's not going to get pulled out if you do that little trick right there. So now that we got our mold modified, we've got our wire form here and our hook on it, we're ready to go mold. So let's go down to the garage. All right, so here's our mold, and I wanted to show y'all one thing before we really start pouring. Is when you modify this Poisontail Jig Mold here and you lay your wire and your hooks in here, it really helps to have two other molds to kind of help support your wire and your hook. And I'll show you what I mean here in a second. So when you lay this thing in here like that, if you've got another mold over here, it'll support the wire here and it will support your hook here. And you just have a mold trying to put this thing in here. You can see how the wire and the hook and everything is going to flit around. Well, it just helps to have those extra molds just to kind of support that. Before you close this thing up, I forgot to tell you, is you'll need a little base pin. But what I've done is I've cut a little bit of it off so it'll fill this
gap up here where the weed guard would go on this Poisontail jig. So you can either fill it in with RTV, or you can use one of these little pins and just cut one off and stick it in there.
Alright, so one thing you're going to do is you're going to have this wire right here kind of in the way. Just kind of bend that thing down, and you want to get that nipple as close to that hole as you can, because I don't know, it just seems like it pours better for me. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't, but here we go.
Alright, here we go. Let's see what we got. There we go. Looks like we got a little flashing around where the hook eye is, but that's okay. We can clean that up. Otherwise, it looks like it's a pretty decent pour. So when I grab these things, I like to grab them by the sprue and kind of pull them out. There we go. There's our pour. Don't look too bad, does it? Let's do another one. Our little pin is still in there. We've got our hook. Let's just lay it in there. That thing right like that. There we go. It's in there, ready to go.
Here's another thing I'll do, especially when it's kind of chilly outside. I'll run some lead over the top of my mold on one side, and then I'll flip it over and do it again. So what this does, it keeps your mold warm, but it also keeps all your components in there. It warms them up too, and that sometimes helps molding it. Helps the lead flow. So here we go.
There we go. Got another decent pour out of it.
So here we go. We've got our head. We need to cut this sprue off, and we need to cut this off right here. So the best way to do that is just take a pair of these side cutters that are meant to cut lead. And when you cut them, you'll notice there's a flat side here and, well, a not so flat side. You want to use the flat side here so that you'll make a flush cut on the thing. So to do this, just come in here and start cutting. And then once you cut through just a little bit, you take this thing and then just kind of snap it off. And sometimes it'll snap off clean, but like this right here, it's got a little bit of a jagged edge on that. So we will clean that up here in just a second. And then to clean up this around the wire here where the hook eye was on the jig, just take this thing and kind of cut around the wire like that, and then you can just pull this little piece off like right like that. That's it right there. Now to clean this up right here, what I like to do is I like to get a little cup, and then I just take a file and kind of file this up. Now you want to do this over something that you can catch the lead filings for them, because you don't want those running everywhere, because you know lead can be bad for you. So we're just going to take this thing, kind of clean this thing up, and it doesn't take a whole lot. You can see right there that's cleaned up pretty well. On it just a little bit. Every now and then I'll just kind of tap my file on my cup just to make sure I'm getting all the lead filings out of it. Another good place to do this is over the top of your lead pipe, and then they go right back into that. So there's a little bit right there. And then right here, this piece right here is from where the weed guard is. Remember we had that cut off pin in there, so that's that right there. And you can just clean that up by just do a little few strokes over the top of that, right like that. And so now our head's cleaned up. We're ready to paint this thing. All right, let's paint this thing. So we're going to start out with Createx OPEC white, and all I've done here is just tape the hook off and a little bit of the wire just to prevent overspray. Alright, there we go. We've got our base coat of white on there. And really, you could probably put a top coat of epoxy on this thing and be good and go fishing. Just like that. But we're going to jazz it up just a little bit. So y'all hold on. So the next color we're going to put on is Createx Fluorescent Yellow. So the last color we got here is Createx medium gray, and we're just going to use that to darken the eyeballs up and just a little bit on the head. There we go. So before we put epoxy on this thing, we're just going to put some 5 30-second eyeballs on here. We got this guy some eyes. You can see where he's going. Let's put some epoxy on here. We're just going to use some Devicon 2-ton clear, and this stuff is waterproof. So we just got a little cup here, and we're just going to dispense some out into it. This stuff isn't dried up. And then we're just going to take a little craft brush, mix this stuff around, paint this stuff on here. We'll take this tape off here just so I can get around this down here pretty good. I don't think a little epoxy down here is going to hurt anything. Alright, there we go. Got our epoxy on. We'll put it on the turner and we'll be back to finish this build up. We've got our epoxy on our head here. It's painted. All we really got to do now is get an R-bend in that. Now we've got everything else together here. We've got our skirt that we're going to use, or we're going to build that. We've got a number 4 Colorado 4.5 willow blade. It's got the swivel on it, some beads, a clevis, some tubing, and then this little deal right here is our little blue bender, and that's what we're going to use to put the R-bend in. So let's put that in it. So this is what I do, is I'll take my wire and I'll mark it right here at 2 inches. And that way I can get a consistent R-bend. If you want your R farther away, you can do that. If you want it closer, you can do that too. That's the beauty of using this little blue bender here to make your R-bends. Alright, to do this, we're just going to put this thing in here, line our pin up here, our mark that we've got right here. And I'll line that up kind of like this right here. Make sure everything's straight in this. And just bend this thing over like this. And sometimes your C-clamp gets in your way, but that's okay. We'll fix that here in a second. That right there, there we go. We've got an R-bend, just like that, real easy. Alright, now that we've got our R-bend in here, we're ready to start putting some blades and a skirt on this thing. So, first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to put a bead on there. And then I'm going to take this clevis right here and this number 4 Colorado blade right here, and we're going to slide this thing on here. You want to make sure you get your blade, you know, where the cup of it is in the back. And what this bead does right here, it keeps your clevis from sliding up on this R-bend here. Then we're going to take another bead. We'll slide that on there like that. And then all I've got right here is a piece of just clear tubing, and it's about 3/4 of an inch long, and then that's going to go on there. So what this tubing does, or spacers, and you could use beads or anything else you wanted to, but that just lets this blade be able to rotate around and not get hung up on the rear willow leaf blade. All I've got to do now is put a bend in rear wire here, and we're going to use the lock loop, and I'm going to do that, but I'm going to do that off camera. But here's a video. Y'all go watch that, see how to do this lock loop, and we'll be right back when we get that thing on. Alright, we've got our lock loop on here, and it takes a little bit to do that, but I like to do that because I don't like this. I've had these blades come off, especially if a fish comes up and grabs that spinnerbait blade. I've had a few yank it off. So I've got this thing coming down to where it's right at the point of the hook. That way, if it comes up and one mashes it down, this wire's not going to interfere with the hook point or anything. And but if you want them longer, you can make them longer. If you want it shorter, you can make it shorter too. Let's make our skirt now. So what I've got here, little skirt making tool. It's got a little wire in it. But what you do is you take one of these little collars here, and you roll that up on here like this. And then this little metal piece here, it comes out. And you take this little wire here and stick in there, and that allows you to be able to hook your skirts on. So essentially here I've got chartreuse, a pearl white, and a barbed wire chartreuse. This is a skirt that I like for this slow roller, especially if there's a little bit of color in the water. I think this chartreuse and white does real well. But all you do, and I'll say this too, so this is a half a tab, this is a full tab, and then this is a half a tab here as well. So that's essentially a 2-tab skirt on this slow roll spinnerbait. That's what I like to do, especially for a slow roller. It kind of cuts down on the bulk a little bit and keeps that thing down there in the rocks where it needs to be. So to do this, all you're going to do is take your tab and hook it on that little hook like that right there. Then I'm going to take my full tab of white pearl here and hook it on. And you try to hook these things in the center of the tab as best as you can. And then here's my tab of chartreuse, and then you pull those down there like that, and then you want to pull them up into this skirt tool to about where you want your little rubber band here to be, and then you just roll that thing off like that, and you've got a skirt, and you unhook it, and there you go. And if you need to adjust it a little bit, you can adjust it some. It's your skirt, so you know, do with it what you want to. And then all you do is just take a pair of scissors, and you want to cut these little ends off here, and you just lay them all on there, cut them all off even like that. And then you can do the same thing on the other side. Now you've got your own little custom skirt. We'll lay these things out here. Try to get them in the layers there. I'm going to take my spinnerbait, and I want the barbed wire stuff to be on top, so we're just going to lay that on there. And then we're going to push that thing on there like that right there. Alright, there we go. We've got our custom slow roll spinnerbait. And one thing you want to do You want to tap that blade and make sure it spins like that. Make sure you got a good spinner, because you want that thing to spin as slow as you can get it to roll down there in the rocks. So anyways, I'm Rodney with eFishin. We'll catch y'all out on the water here sometime soon. We're out.